Good morning. Today we're going to journal through First Chronicles 4 through 6, and again it continues talking about the genealogy of the Israelites, and we're talking about well, it starts with the sons of Judah. So I mean, he's one of the 12 tribes, and so we begin talking about Judah and Simeon in the tribes of those two in chapter 4 and through the history of the Israelites, those two tribes were very close together, and basically the tribe of Simeon ended up, just kind of as a part of the tribe of Judah later. And we don't really hear a lot about, the descendants of Simeon separated out that way, or the lands that they would live in that way. But as we go through these chapters, there's a few little snippets of interest, kind of, other than the genealogy. In verse 9 of chapter 14, Jabez was honored more than his brothers, and his mother named him Jabez because I bore him in pain. So Jabez cries out to God, "Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my border, and that your hand would be with me and you would keep me from hurt and harm." So we have this Jabez kind of singled out as, he was born in pain. Well, I mean, mothers have pain in every birth. I mean, it's just, so maybe it must have been something exceptional or whatever. And so evidently maybe the name Jabez dealt with pain or extreme pain. I mean, I don't know that, but it was, she named him because of her pain. But he cries out to God, and God hears him. So God favors him, and his borders, his lands do become more. And then in verse 14, there's some of them names, and it became the father of Jacob, so called because they were artisans. So this is who they were. And then we go on with, another long list of names, and then verse 23, these were the potters and the inhabitants of Netium and Gedara, or whatever, and they lived there with the king in his service. What king? I mean, I don't know that, but and it was, as it's talking about these sons of these people, it isn't always just the son, but it's the grandson, the great-grandson, the great-great-great-great-great-great, going on down. And so it's each tribe, expanded out several generations. And then, verse 24, here we talk about the sons of Simeon, because we've been talking about Judah. Well, Simeon comes in, and we hear about him here, but, much less later on. And maybe part of the reason is told to us in verse 27, that, Shimei had 16 sons and 6 daughters, but his brothers did not have as many children, nor did their family multiply so they lived, in conjunction with these others. They weren't as numerous a tribe, so they couldn't, maintain their lands. Who knows? I mean, it's kind of what's told us to here. But it tells us that, these were the towns until David became king. So we know that this isn't just, really old time, because this is coming right up to the time of David. And we'll get into a place, where it talks about in 6 or 7, or verse 6, chapter 6, I think it is, that, they were the musicians or something in the temple that Solomon built. So, this is a long way from the very beginning of the Israelites after the escape from Egypt. And then starting in verse 34, it talks about this group of names, and they're so, I don't even want to try to pronounce them for you, because I'll just mess them up really bad, but that doesn't matter. But this group of people journeyed to the entrance of Gedor, a land of some sort. And on the east side of the valley, they sought pasture for their flocks, for their cattle. They found rich ground and they settled. And then here we hear of some of the battles, briefly, of of these people, settled into place, and some of them, 500 men, went to and destroyed the remnant of the Amalekites who had escaped that were living there. So here we're back talking about, the conquest or the inhabitation of the promised land as the Israelites first fled or first were freed. And chapter 5 begins with the sons of Reuben. So again, Reuben is one of the 12 sons of Israel, Jacob. And he was the firstborn, it says, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to sons, So he was out of favor with God and with his dad and everything that way, and didn't get quite so many of the blessings. Verse 9, in talking about, some others there, they lived as far as the beginning of the desert side of the Euphrates, because their cattle had multiplied. And in the days of Saul, we're talking about King Saul, so not quite to Solomon or to David, but quite a while after, we would have seen the establishment of the family of Reuben. Verse 11, the sons of Gad, another one of those 12 sons of Israel, and talks about the cities, the towns that they lived in. In verse 18, it's the Reubenites again, and so we bounce back to some of Reuben after we'd had a little bit about Gad. So it's not completely, but it's bringing the Reubenites, the Gadites together, conquering more land, or I don't know if I should say conquering, but gaining the land, driving out the inhabitants, killing them, capturing their cattle, and finding their new home in the promised land from God. And then verse 23 talks about the half-tribe of Manasseh and how they had done all of these, and it says, lists a bunch of names, and it says, mighty warriors, famous men, heads of clans, and then that word but begins verse 25. And when you hear a but, you hear that word, there's a change in things. So, but they were not faithful to God. They transgressed against God and their ancestors. And so, verse 26, the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of two of these kings of Assyria, and he carried many of these three tribes away into captivity. And we've read some of that already, but it's a brief account of it here again, a reminder, and we'll more likely hear more about some of these things again later too. Chapter 6 is the lineage of the Levites, and the Levites didn't get a specific area of land like the other tribes did, but since they were the priestly tribe, they received so many cities in each of the other 11 districts or sections that the promised land was divided into. And it talks about some of the different cities, and names some of the different cities in the land of these people. They get these 13 towns and their lands and stuff that way. And then verse 31, we get to, we're already up to now the King David. These are the men whom David put in charge of the service of song in the house of the Lord after the ark came to be there. And this isn't the temple that Solomon built, but, the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Jerusalem. And David put this group of men, people that they mention here, and in one place, or one that I read, in verse 33, it says, of the Kohathites, Herman the singer is what it says in this Bible. Another Bible says Herman the musician. But they were all, a bunch of men, people listed in the charge of the music of the tabernacle. They and their kindred Levites, verse 48 says, they were appointed all for service for the tabernacle of the house of God. But then, even though all of that was said, the next verse, Aaron and his sons, and it doesn't mean just his sons, but his grandsons and his descendants made offerings on the altars, and it goes in and it lists many sons of Aaron that way as well, and talks about that. And then going on again, talks about more of the lands that are designated to the Levites. And verse 46 and on just a little bit talks about, says, some of the families of the sons of Kohath had their towns and territories, and they were given the cities of refuge. And, we talked about the cities of refuge, and we'll hear more about them again too, but, a place of safety, a place of sanctuary, a place that they could go so that they knew that they would be safe until a fair trial could be held. And again, what better place to have a safety net, a place of sanctuary, than within the area allocated to the priests, to those who are serving God in that way. So we continue to see a lot of names and a few little snippets of information get tossed in about things that happen in the settlement of the Promised Land.